Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really resonant question, I think. How do you actually know if you're, settling in a relationship?
Right.
We've been looking at some interesting ideas that sort of break down these key indicators, trying to help figure out the difference between just compromising, which is healthy,
Mm.
and that feeling of just settling.
Yeah, and our aim here is really just to bring some clarity, hopefully, to this part of life, which, let's face it, can be pretty confusing.
Totally.
It's such a vital conversation because, well, love and relationships, they're complex, aren't they? It can be surprisingly easy to convince yourself, oh, this is good enough.
hmm
Especially like if you're scared of being alone or you've put in so much time already.
Right, the history.
Exactly. But the insights we've been looking at really highlight how settling, it can unfortunately lead to quite a bit of unhappiness down the road. So being able to, recognize the signs is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to help us get a handle on this, we're going to explore 7 key indicators of settling that came up in the material we looked at. So yeah, let's get right to it.
Okay. Let's start with a really big one. That feeling that you're actually more lonely inside the relationship than you were when you were single.
Oof, yeah.
What's fascinating here is that difference, isn't it? Between just like physically being near someone versus actually feeling connected.
hmm
Research and things like attachment theory suggests that feeling lonely, even when your partner is right there, it often points to a lack of secure attachment.
Secure attachment.
Yeah, like where one or maybe both people just don't feel truly seen or understood or like their emotional needs are being met.
That makes so much sense. The
Yeah.
material we looked at asks, do you ever feel emotionally starved, even if you're like sharing a bed every night? That really paints a picture.
It does.
Because a healthy relationship really at its core, it should give you that feeling of connection, right?
Hmm.
Support, feeling seen.
Yeah.
But I guess, isn't it normal to feel a little lonely sometimes? Even in a good relationship, how can you tell if it's just, a passing thing versus this chronic feeling of being alone with them?
Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction. Look, having some occasional solitude, maybe for reflection, that's healthy, that's normal.
Okay.
But the kind of loneliness we're talking about here, it's persistent. It's this deep-seated feeling that your emotional needs just aren't being met. Not by the person who, should be your closest confidant.
Right.
It's the absence of that shared vulnerability, that real intimacy. So if you find yourself consistently craving that deeper emotional connection or validation from your partner, and it's just not there,
hmm
well, it prompts a really important question, doesn't it? Is this relationship actually based on genuine love and like mutual fulfillment? Or are you maybe just holding on for comfort or maybe to avoid being alone?
That's heavy.
It is that persistent feeling of just profound loneliness within the partnership. That's a really significant indicator.
Okay. Okay, let's look at another one. And this one I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
Constantly making excuses for your partner.
Ah, yes.
I mean, I know I've definitely found myself doing that in the past, maybe without even fully realizing it at the time.
It's interesting how easily this can just become a pattern, right?
Yeah.
Our materials give some really common examples, like
Oh, like what?
things like, oh, he's just not great at communicating, or maybe she's just really stressed with work right now. That's why she hasn't called back. These little justifications, they can start to pile up.
They really, really do.
Mm.
And the discussion piece we looked at emphasizes that when you're constantly feeling like you need to explain away or defend your partner's actions,
Mhm.
not just to friends or family, but even like in your own head,
Mhm.
that's a pretty strong sign you might be settling.
It is.
Because love, ideally, it shouldn't require you to constantly be like a defense attorney for your significant other.
Exactly. Love shouldn't feel like a courtroom battle.
But I mean, is there a point where maybe giving your partner the benefit of the doubt is just healthy empathy?
Yeah.
Like when does it cross that line into making excuses and, settling?
That's a very insightful question. And yes, offering the benefit of the doubt, especially if they're going through a tough time, that is a sign of empathy. That's understanding.
Okay.
However, when it becomes a consistent pattern,
Yeah.
when you're explaining away behaviors that make you feel consistently unhappy or disrespected or unseen, that's when it shifts. It goes from empathy to excuse making.
Oh, okay. The pattern.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's about the difference between, say, understanding a temporary setback versus just normalizing patterns of behavior that really chip away at your well-being.
Got it. Okay, moving on. Let's consider the idea of growth, or maybe the lack of it, in a relationship.
Mm.
The material highlights this point where you feel like you've just stopped growing, both, as individuals and as a couple.
Mhm.
I wonder, though, is that feeling of stagnation something maybe lots of long-term couples hit at some point?
Mm.
How can they tell if it's just a temporary lull or, a real sign of settling?
That's a really important point to raise because, yes, relationships, they naturally have ebbs and flows, quiet periods.
Right.
But I think a key difference between just a temporary lull and actual settling is the sort of underlying sense of momentum or lack thereof.
Momentum. How so?
Well, in a healthy relationship, even during those quieter times, there's usually still this underlying support for each other's individual growth and a sense that the relationship itself is still kind of evolving,
Hmm.
moving somewhere.
Okay.
Settling, on the other hand, it feels more like a complete standstill, No real forward movement, no new inspiration, maybe even a sense of just resignation. It's when that plateau just becomes the permanent landscape.
Yeah, like the relationship has just parked itself and nobody's really thinking about getting back in the driver's seat.
That's a good way to put it.
The piece we looked at asks a really thought-provoking question, too. Do you feel inspired by your partner and the relationship itself? Or are you simply, going through the motions day after day?
Hmm.
That lack of inspiration, that lack of progress, it really seems like it could be a significant indicator.
Absolutely. And if we kind of connect this to the bigger picture, that lack of growth,
Yeah.
it can often lead to a much deeper sense of unfulfillment over time.
Yeah, I can see that.
And what's interesting here is how easily we can sometimes mistake like a comfortable routine for genuine contentment when actually in reality we might just be stuck in a rut that's stopping us from really thriving.
Stuck in a comfortable rut. Okay. All right, let's dig into something that can be a real foundational issue when your core values just don't line up.
The big stuff.
Yeah, the really deep-seated things that kind of guide how you live your life.
This is where things can get particularly tricky, I think, because that initial attraction or maybe shared surface level interests, they can sometimes mask these more fundamental differences, at least for a while.
True.
The discussion piece we read points this out really well. While yes, getting along and having chemistry are definitely important, significant clashes in core values, they can create huge friction and unhappiness in the long run.
So it's not just about liking the same movies.
Not at all. Psychologically, when our core values, the things that really matter to us, are consistently ignored or disregarded, it creates this sense of internal conflict. It can lead to feeling resentment, even a diminished sense of self-worth.
Wow, yeah.
It's about fundamental principles.
Exactly. And the examples they gave were so telling, I thought, like wanting children versus definitely not wanting them,
Huge.
or needing a partner who's emotionally open when your partner just tends to shut down, or valuing fidelity while your partner engages in behavior you see as, well, disrespectful to the relationship boundaries.
Right. These aren't just minor disagreements, are they? They really touch upon how you see the world, what you want your life to actually look like.
Fundamentally.
Precisely. And our materials rightly emphasize how these maybe seemingly smaller disconnects in core beliefs, they can just build up. They accumulate and breed resentment over time.
Yeah.
Choosing to stay in a situation where your fundamental values are consistently being undermined or ignored, that's definitely a form of settling, and it can really erode the very foundation of the relationship.
Okay. Now, this next one is described as sneaky, and I can totally see why.
Ah, yes. The potential trap.
Being more in love with your partner's potential than with who they actually are right now. I think that's something a lot of people might find themselves doing, maybe without even fully realizing it.
It is sneaky because it really plays on our, natural human tendency to be hopeful, to want to see the best in people. So you focus on the person you believe they could be, if only they made certain changes or maybe overcame certain habits. And you find yourself more invested in that potential future version than in the reality of your day-to-day life together.
Right. Loving the idea of them.
Exactly. And we often see in relationship counseling that this in love with potential dynamic, it can sometimes stem from one partner feeling a need to sort of fix or rescue the other, which ultimately isn't really about genuine love. It's more about their own underlying needs, perhaps.
That's interesting. But the key insight here, right, as the source material points out, is that a relationship exists with the person as they are, right now, in the present moment.
Absolutely crucial.
Not who they might become someday down the line. So if you consistently find yourself more drawn to this, imagined future self of your partner, than the actual person you're sharing your life with, well, you're really setting yourself up for potential disappointment, aren't you?
You really are. And what's fascinating here, too, is how this focus on potential can sometimes be a kind of avoidance.
Avoidance. How so?
Well, by constantly looking ahead to who they could be, you might be unintentionally overlooking or, downplaying the current realities of the relationship, the things that might be consistently causing you unhappiness right now.
Okay. Ignoring the present.
Exactly. And as our materials wisely remind us, people ultimately grow and evolve on their own timeline, not according to the expectations or the timelines we might, however well-intentioned, set for them.
Okay. That's a really important one. Let's tackle a really tough one now, though.
Mm.
The significant role that fear can play. Specifically, the fear of being alone.
Hmm. Yeah, this is a big driver for many people.
It seems like it can be a really powerful motivator for just staying in relationships that aren't truly fulfilling.
It's an incredibly powerful force. And the discussion piece we looked at addresses this head on. It asserts that fear. It's often a very shaky foundation for a lasting, healthy relationship.
Definitely doesn't sound stable.
Not at all. The fear of facing life on your own, the fear of having to start all over again, these anxieties can unfortunately trap us. They keep us in situations that just don't truly serve our long-term well-being.
Yeah. And the direct question posed in the material we've been looking at is just so important, I think.
Which one is that?
It asks, if you knew, like without a shadow of a doubt, that you would be absolutely okay on your own, would you still actively choose to be in this current relationship?
Wow, that's a powerful question.
It really is. And a no to that question, as the source points out, is incredibly revealing. It just cuts right through the fear, doesn't it? And points to the underlying truth about how you really feel about the relationship itself.
Exactly. This really brings up an important point about our own sense of self-reliance, doesn't it? Recognizing our own inner strength.
For sure.
What's interesting here is how confronting that fear, even though it can be really uncomfortable, maybe even scary, that can actually be the very first and most crucial step towards ultimately finding a truly fulfilling and healthy partnership later on.
Taking that first uncomfortable step. Okay. Finally, let's discuss what feels like such a fundamental piece of any close relationship. Just the ability to be your authentic self without holding back.
It is absolutely fundamental, isn't it? Our materials describe this feeling, this need to constantly sort of shrink yourself.
Frank yourself.
Yeah, like carefully censoring your opinions or maybe consistently wearing a kind of emotional mask just to try and keep the peace, to avoid conflict in the relationship.
Ugh, that sounds exhausting.
It is that constant process of self-editing. It can take a really significant emotional toll over time.
I bet. A healthy partnership, ideally, it should be a safe place, right? A supportive space where you feel completely comfortable and secure enough just to be, well, 100% you.
Yes, all your quirks included.
All the quirks.
Okay.
So if you find that you're constantly having to hide important parts of who you are just to keep things harmonious, as the discussion piece points out, that's not really genuine love, is it? Or acceptance. It's more like a performance.
It's exactly like a performance.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly draining in the long run.
Yeah.
And the source material makes a really powerful statement here. Everyone deserves so much more than having to constantly, audition for basic emotional acceptance within their own relationship.
Audition. Wow, yeah.
If you can't truly be yourself with your partner, then a really crucial element of honesty and true intimacy is likely missing.
Okay, so let's just briefly recap those 7 key signs we've explored, drawing from the insights in our material.
Good idea.
Right. So number 1 was that feeling of being more lonely in the relationship than when you were single. Then constantly finding yourself making excuses for your partner's behavior.
Yep.
Third, a noticeable lack of growth, both individually and as a couple. Stagnation.
Stagnation, right.
Fourth, that fundamental misalignment of core values, the big stuff.
The non-negotiables.
Fifth, being more in love with your partner's potential than their actual present reality.
The sneaky one.
Sixth, staying in the relationship primarily out of a fear of being alone.
Fear is the foundation.
And finally, number 7, that persistent inability to be your genuine, authentic self, feeling like you have to wear a mask.
Those are the 7 key signs.
Yeah.
And it's just so important to remember, as our materials really emphasize, recognizing these signs, it isn't about engaging in self-criticism
Well,
or, assigning blame to either yourself or your partner. That's not the point. It's really about empowering yourself, giving yourself greater self-awareness,
right.
and developing a clearer understanding of your own fundamental needs and desires when it comes to what you want in a relationship.
Absolutely. It's about empowerment.
Right.
Ultimately, what we all deserve, really, is a relationship where love feels like freedom,
Yeah.
like genuine acceptance,
Yeah.
not something that restricts you or requires you to constantly compromise your core self. It should be a space where you can truly thrive and flourish, not just merely survive or get by.
So well put, thriving, not just surviving. Which leads us, I think, to a final thought for everyone listening to really consider. Take some dedicated time. Really reflect on these different points we've discussed, but within the context of your own life, your own relationships.
Hmm.
Maybe consider, spending some time journaling about your thoughts and feelings around these questions,
Hmm.
or perhaps talking them through with a really trusted friend or confidant,
Yeah, getting an outside perspective.
or even exploring the possibility of seeking guidance from a qualified professional, like a therapist or counselor. Because investing in this kind of self-reflection, it truly is an investment in your own future well-being
Definitely.
and in your capacity for building healthy, truly fulfilling relationships moving forward.